If you're someone who has ever felt the slightest bit awkward when giving a call to action on your podcast, join the club. Because in the episode before this one, I answered a listener question about exactly that. Why does giving a call to action feel so weird and uncomfortable? How do I know what call to action to give in every episode? So if you haven't listened to that episode yet, I recommend listening to that first, then jump back in with me here. Because once the internal resistance is out of the way, the next question your brain's going to want the answer to is, where's the best place to put that call to action inside the episode? How do I say it so that it's natural, not like sticking out like a sore thumb in the middle of the episode? And most importantly, how the heck do I know if my calls to action are even working? Come on, if you listen to this podcast for any length of time, you know that I'm not going to leave you hanging. I've got all those answers and more coming up for you next. Welcome to Insider Secrets to a Top 100 podcast. I'm your host, Courtney Elmer. Let's make your business binge-worthy. When it comes to giving calls to action, particularly in a podcast episode, the first question people have is, well, what do I say? What call to action should I give? How many calls to action should I have? And we addressed a lot of that in the episode right before this one. Once a podcast host has the answer to those questions, the next question they naturally ask is, where's the best place to put my call to action inside of the episode? Is there a best place to put it? Is it pre-roll? Is it mid-roll? Is it post-roll? And what the heck? Are you speaking Greek, Courtney? I don't even know what pre-roll, mid-roll, and post-roll even means. Don't worry, I've got the answer for you, and it is very simple. You are going to deliver your calls to actions in your episode when it makes the most sense. Now, this is really important because there are a lot of schools of thought out there, and there are people who are going to try to tell you that, oh, pre-roll is the route to go. That's the best place to put it. And there are some arguments to be made for when you want to give specific calls to actions before the episode. But I don't know about you. I cannot stand listening to a podcast that opens up with a litany of ads. Get me to the content. Get me to the good stuff right off the bat. And I promise you, the fastest way to lose listeners is to open your podcast with an ad. Because at the end of the day, what is a call to action? It's an ad. You're promoting something. So opening your podcast with that is often a big turnoff, especially for cold listeners who don't know you. Your existing listeners might tolerate it. They may even hit the skip button because they know you're going to get to the good content here in just a second. But new listeners, that's going to be a big turnoff for them. So in most cases, I don't recommend putting a call to action at the beginning of your episode. Now, for a while, there was another school of thought that said, well, put it at the end of your episode. Why? Because when you run it post-roll, which means at the end of the content of your episode, that the most loyal listeners are going to stick around and they're going to hear it. In my experience, that is not the case. Why? Because when your loyal listeners and when new listeners get to the end of your episode, if your content was good enough, they're already skipping ahead to the next episode. They are not sticking around to listen to whatever litany of ads you want to put at the end of your episodes. Now, there's another school of thought that says put it in the middle of your episodes. And we even see some hosting providers that now have like a dynamic content mid-roll insertion feature. Don't use it, because what happens, and you can always tell when people are using that dynamically inserted content and that it's not strategically inserted in the middle of the episode, is that it literally will cut you off in the middle of a sentence or in the middle of a word sometimes. And then suddenly it's like we're jumping to an ad, and then the ad plays, and then we're jumping back to the content, and it just creates a very choppy listening experience. Okay, Courtney, so you're telling me not to put it pre-roll, not to put it post-roll, and not to put it mid-roll, at least not dynamically inserted. So what do I do? Say it when it makes sense. Simple as that. It truly, truly is. There are times in my episodes, and if you've listened to this podcast for any length of time, then you know that sometimes I'm talking about something and I'm like, you know what? By the way, if you want to dive deeper into this, the live workshop is where you need to be. Click the link in the show notes. Or by the way, if you're struggling to grow your podcast right now, or if you're someone who wants to launch a podcast, but you don't want to waste time creating something that nobody listens to, book a call in the show notes with my team and let's sit down. Let's have a conversation. Let's take a look at your show. Sometimes it just comes up very naturally whenever I'm talking about whatever I'm talking about. And so that's where I say it. And that's where you should say it too. And remember, just like I mentioned toward the tail end of the episode before this one, when you give your call to action, the goal here is not to give a 5-minute pitch about whatever it is you're asking. The goal is to be confident, to be clear in your intention for why you're giving that call to action, and then be brief. And then tie it directly to the listener benefit of that call to action. You're not just giving a call to action for any random reason. You're giving a call to action specifically because it serves your listener. So you have to be the one to connect those dots and tell the listener how it serves them. Because I promise you, they're not going to try to read your mind and figure out, why are you saying this and how does it serve me? You want to just come out and be forthcoming and just say it. No begging, no rushing, no stacking 5 asks in the middle of one breath, trying to cram in all your calls to actions at once. Ultimately saying, you know what? Here's why I'm giving you this call to action, because I know it's going to help you do XYZ. So if you want XYZ, go take this action. And most importantly, say it how you would naturally say it. Not your nervous, oh my gosh, I have to give a pitch now voice, but your actual voice, just like you would invite your best friend over for dinner or your favorite client to do whatever it is that you're asking them to do. Hey, you want to give a testimonial, please? I want you to give a testimonial because it really helps me and it helps my brand. No, that's not what you're asking them, right? You're saying, hey, look, if you had a great experience in working with us, it would really mean a lot if you took 30 seconds to just give a quick testimonial that we could feature on our website. I would love to shout you out. I would love to shout your company out. I would love to feature you, feature your podcast, whatever. And in exchange for your testimonial, here's what I'm going to give to you. And it's so simple, right? We just connect the dots and give the payoff right there in the ask, and it makes people so much more inclined to do what you're asking them to do. And it has to come from a place of authenticity. Now, all of that said, I know that there are some of you still listening right now who are like, okay, Courtney, but what do I actually say? And you're going to hear me say this time and again, it doesn't matter so much about the words as it is about your intent behind them. That said, I know that some of you are still going to be like, but I need to know what to say. So I am going to give you a very simple framework here that you can utilize as a jumping off point when giving your call to action, because there are 3 things that you want to hit on whenever you make your offer. You want to hit on who it's for and who it's not for. You want to clearly say what problem it solves, and you want to clearly state what the payoff is for them. In other words, what do they get or what can happen when they solve that problem by taking that action? So here's the framework. Ready? Write it down. If you are an X who wants to Y without the Z, click the link in the show notes to thing you want them to do. Register for the workshop, book a call, etc. Super simple, very light. You don't need a 12-minute preamble to tee up your pitch, she says in a letter to her former self. And speaking of calls to actions, look, if you are ready for your podcast to start bringing in steady leads and clients and not just downloads, this is what we do with our clients inside of Pod Launch. So click the link in the show notes, hop on a 20-minute call where we're going to walk you through how it works and see if it's a good fit for you and for your show so that you can turn your podcast into something that your listeners can't wait to binge and buy from. See what I did there? No, seriously, that was for you. Go book a call if that's you. Okay, I'm kidding. But seriously, if you want to book a call, go book a call. All right, look, so giving a call to action, keep it light. Honestly, we place way too much emphasis and we take things way too seriously. And by we, I mean me. I have done this so many times where it's like, oh, here's the call to action. Now it has to be perfect and I have to say the right thing. And it's like, at the end of the day, no, all your listeners want to know is what are you asking them to do and how does it help them? That's it. And so when we can approach this with a spirit of experimentation and a spirit of fun and a spirit of this is not so serious. I just need to say the thing that I'm inviting them to do. I need to come at it with a clear intention and I just need to say it how I would normally say it to a client or to a friend. Then it's going to make the delivery of that call to action a lot easier for you. And it's going to be received so much better by your listeners. Okay, so once you give your call to action with full confidence, because you fully believe it's actually going to help the people that you're giving that call to action to, the next question on your mind is going to be, well, how do I know if my calls to action are working? So my question for you is, well, what are you tracking and how are you tracking it? Here's what we like to do. I'm going to give you a peek right now behind the scenes. We drive to our email list and we like to track email signups. We have a few ways that we track to attribute them to the podcast. You can use unique links. You can use UTMs. ChatGPT can walk you through how to do that. You can have a Q&A box in your form field. How did you hear about us? You could use a combo of these, but the simplest thing that I have found to do, if you're just starting out especially, is to have unique links to your calls to action that you share only on the podcast. Those unique links will lead to a landing page specific to podcast listeners. And then when those people opt in to whatever it is you're asking them to opt in, they get onto your email list, you have your email list provider tag those people as podcast listeners. This way, you can easily attribute, if you're giving a call to action on your podcast, you know that that's the only place you're sharing that link. So therefore, the people who are landing on your landing page are only coming from the podcast. And the conversion rate that you're getting from people who land on the page to opting in, you can look at what is that conversion? How can I optimize this? If the conversion is lower than you think it should be, well, then go back to your calls to action in your episodes. Make sure that your landing page and the messaging on that landing page is aligning with whatever you said in the episode. That alignment is really important from a messaging and positioning standpoint. And then when those people opt in, you're tagging them and you're attributing that action or that opt-in back to your podcast. Then guess what? Down the road, especially if you have a business, when that person makes a purchase, you can easily cross-check and cross-tab that data to look and see, oh, look, Susie Q just enrolled into my program during this launch. Let me go check and see if she's a podcast listener. And then boop, 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 you type in her name or her email address into your email list provider and you see, yeah, she's tagged podcast listener. And then you can attribute that revenue back to your podcast. So again, this is a high level look. There might be some nuances when it comes to the specific landing page provider you're using, the specific email provider that you're using, the specific business model that you have. Maybe for you, you're not even interested in driving clients because you don't have a business. You're just interested in getting sponsors to monetize the podcast. But nonetheless, you still want to be building your email list. And so the process is the same, just without the monetization attribution. Essentially, you're just looking at what link am I sharing on the show? Do I have a specific landing page for those people? What is the conversion of the opt-ins on that landing page? And then can I attribute the people who opt in back to the podcast? Well, the answer is going to be yes, because you know that you're only sharing that link and that landing page on the podcast. So that's the simplest way. There are other ways that you can do this that might be slightly more accurate, but they're also slightly more complex. And so I'm not here to add any overwhelm or make things more complex than they need to be. This is honestly all you need to have in terms of your setup to be able to track if your calls to actions are working. And then on the back end of that, you're just going to look and you're going to see, okay, how many people opted in this month? Is that number where we want it to be? And if it's not, then we go back and we tweak the calls to action. We make sure that they align. We make sure that the messaging is clear. We make sure that the ask is clear, that the intention is clear, that the payoff is clear, and all of those things. If you are getting the conversions, well then fantastic, double down, keep doing what you're doing. So here's the thing. A lot of podcasters give calls to action, but they never track. And then they come to me and they say, well, my podcast is not converting. And I'm like, but are you tracking it? And then they say, well, no, or not as good as I should be, or that I know I should be doing. And so if you don't have it set up, and if you're not actually looking at the data, well, then it's going to feel like your podcast is not converting. And then, there'll be those random people out of the blue that sit down with you on a sales call and they're like, well, I listened to your podcast and I love it. And you're like, great. But again, your brain is not going to naturally connect those dots between this person listened, the fact that they listened and they heard a call to action, they clicked, and that podcast episode or my podcast in general, because this person's binging all the episodes, is now driving traffic into my business or onto my email list. And so we have to be able to have these tracking methods in place. Okay, enough about that. I think I've harped on that enough. So if you have never checked your call to action performance, terms like podcast attribution and conversion ROI, they're going to make your eyes glaze over. You're going to be like, what the heck are you talking about, Courtney? And you're not the only one. But you are also missing out on the data that tells you what's working and what's not if you're not tracking it, which brings it full circle and gives you the valuable feedback on what you need to either keep doing or on what to do differently in your episode calls to action. All right, so between the last episode and this one, here are your marching orders going forward when it comes to your calls to action. If you have any hesitation around giving the calls to action, go listen to the episode before this one and get to the root of that hesitation. Because at the end of the day, we are humans behind the microphone, and humans have baggage. And that baggage is going to affect how you show up and what results you're able to create. So get to the bottom of that first. I'm going to link to the episode here below in the show notes to make it super easy to click back and listen to that and really take the time to explore that. I know some of you listening are going to write that off and be like, that's not important. I just need to get the framework in place. I just need to give the calls to action, blah, 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 blah. But no, if you don't get to the root of your hesitation, then you are going to find that your calls to actions always underperform. Then you want to get clear on where are you leading people. If you don't know the next step and why a listener should take it, your listener's not going to know that either, and they're not going to take the next step. So when you give that call to action, you want to come at it with a clear intention, keep it light, keep it honest, keep it genuine and true to you, and give that call to action with your whole heart. Like you're telling your best friend or your favorite client, like, here's what you need to do and why I think you should do it. I know I'm giving you a lot of ideas here, and that's all good and fine. But what I really want you to do for testing purposes is to zero in on one call to action and test that for a period of time, then rotate and test that for a period of time. And see between the two, you're essentially doing an A/B test. Which one gives you the most movement? And then from there, you can start to rotate those calls to action more frequently. But what I really want you to have is that testing data first, because otherwise you might give a call to action in this episode, and then you change it in the next episode, and then you give it in the next episode, and then you change it again. And it's not that it's going to confuse listeners necessarily as much as it's going to confuse you when it comes to tracking and knowing exactly what's working and what's not. So whenever you're rolling out something new on the podcast, I always recommend testing it for a period of time, 5 episodes at least. 90 days is even better, but for calls to action, you don't want to give a call to action for 90 straight days because listeners are going to tune it out. You are going to have to rotate sooner than that. But bottom line here being, you want to give it enough time to work. And like I said, it's either going to work or it's not. But either way, you're going to get the result you wanted or the lesson that you needed. So from there, you need to have a back-end system for tracking your calls to action so that you know how many people are clicking. And the reason that I recommend the custom link and landing page method is because I like being able to log in and see how many people are landing on that page but not converting, because that can give you clues into lead misalignment and messaging misalignment. And then from there, you want to be able to track that data on a recurring basis. You don't necessarily have to be the one logging the numbers, but have a VA or someone on your team logging those numbers, and then you need to sit down and review them. How are these calls to actions converting? Are they converting? What might I need to tweak? And look at the data and see what you can gain and glean from it, because that's going to inform your strategy. And then that's the 7th and final step, is to evaluate your strategy from there. Don't tweak any of this until you've given it time to work. The biggest mistake that I see podcasters making, and it just drives me bonkers, is the rush to change things too quickly without understanding if that's what's actually causing the problem or not. And that's a discipline. It's a discipline and a patience of focusing in with intention. And there you have it. Everything you could possibly want to know about calls to action. And look, if I missed anything or if you still have questions, connect with me on LinkedIn. You can find me there. Just type in my name and shoot me a message and actually ask me, because I want to create episodes for you around the questions that you have about your podcast. So please take a minute if you're like at the end of this episode now and you're like, okay, but I still want to know about this, Courtney. Please tell me, because I want to be able to create that content for you. And then don't go anywhere, because in the next episode, I'm so excited for this. I have got one of the top marketing experts in the US and a top 10 podcaster himself joining us to talk about 2 very underrated, very effective marketing strategies for growing your podcast, particularly if you use LinkedIn and or if you are growing an email list. I was laughing to myself during these interviews because I couldn't take notes fast enough, because what he shares is so brilliant. It's stuff that I promise you, this is not mainstream stuff. This is not stuff that you would naturally think about on your own. So grab a pen and head with me to the next episode so that we can help you make your business binge-worthy.